Once upon a time, in the heart of the Congo, where a mighty river wound its way through dense rainforest and ancient trees, there lived a little fish named Tanga. Tanga was small and young, with scales that shimmered like emeralds in the sunlight that trickled through the water. From the moment he hatched in the calm shallows of the river, Tanga was endlessly curious about the world beyond his home. He would often gaze downstream where the river bent into shadow, wondering what mysteries lay beyond. The elder fish chuckled at his questions, but nothing could quench the sparkle of curiosity in Tanga's bright eyes. The river where Tanga lived was alive with color and life. Schools of silvery minnows darted among reeds while old catfish with long whiskers sifted the sandy riverbed for food. Above the water, vibrant kingfishers flashed blue and orange as they dove for fish, and on the banks, moss-covered logs served as perches for sunning turtles and croaking frogs. Towering trees arched overhead, their tangled vines and bright orchids creating a green canopy that turned sunlight into golden shafts dancing on the gentle current. It was a peaceful part of the river, a place where Tanga knew every rock and reed, and where each day began with birdsong echoing through the morning mist. One warm dusk, Tanga joined a circle of young fish gathering around an ancient, scarred catfish named Baku. Baku was one of the river's oldest residents, and he carried many tales. As the water darkened to twilight blue, Baku's deep voice rumbled through the shallows. That evening, he spoke of the river's greatest legend, Mbala, the crocodile. According to Baku, Mbala was as old as the river itself, a giant crocodile with scales dark as midnight and eyes that gleamed like amber in the shadows. It was said Mbala haunted the far bend of the river, where the water pooled black and deep beneath the roots of an ancient twisted tree. No fish who wandered near that place ever returned, or so the legend warned. Baku lowered his voice, and the young fish inched closer, their fins quivering. They say, he intoned, Mbala is part spirit, part beast. He's as long as 3 dugout canoes end to end, with teeth sharper than jagged rocks. Our ancestors told of how he can slip under the water without a ripple and appear where you least expect, jaws wide to snatch the unwary. Tanga felt a chill despite the warm water. Even the frogs and crickets on the bank fell silent as Baku went on. Some say Mbala knows the secrets of the river itself, that he speaks with ancient forest spirits. Others simply call him a demon. A hush fell over the gathering as a night bird cried in the distance, making everyone startle. Most of the young fish trembled and vowed never to stray near that dark bend. But Tanga felt something besides fear stirring in his chest, a spark of fascination. Could those stories be true? Mbala had loomed in their imaginations as a nightmare for generations, yet no living fish had actually seen him and lived to tell the tale. What if the legends were exaggerations? What if there was more to Mbala than just terror? Tanga's mind swirled with questions he dared not ask aloud. Beside him, his friend Kendi noticed the thoughtful look in Tanga's eyes and swished his tail nervously, as if guessing exactly what Tanga was thinking. As the gathering broke up and families drifted back to their nests among the reeds, Kendi hovered at Tanga's side. "You're not thinking of going to find Mbala, are you?" Kendi whispered, eyes wide. He was a slim fish with a jittery way of flicking his fins. He and Tanga had been friends since they were hatchlings, and Kendi knew Tanga's adventurous streak too well. Tanga glanced around to make sure no grown-ups were listening. "I don't know," he admitted softly. "Aren't you curious, Kendi? Everyone's so afraid, but no one has actually seen him. What if he's not as bad as the stories say?" Kendi looked horrified. "Not as bad? Tanga, he'd swallow a little fish like us in one gulp. The elders warn us for a reason." Just then, old Baku himself drifted near, having overheard. He fixed Tanga with a stern but not unkind look. "Listen to your friend," Baku said. "Legends endure for a reason, child. Mbala is not a story to chase. This river has places safe for fish, and that bend is not one of them." Tanga nodded respectfully, but the fire of curiosity in him did not dim. He thanked Baku for the tale and slowly swam home with Kendi, the ancient catfish warning echoing in his ears. That night, the moon rose high, its silver light streaming down through the canopy and making ribbons on the river's surface. Tanga drifted in and out of an uneasy sleep, his mind churning with images of a giant shadow with glowing eyes. He peered toward the distant bend downstream, which lay in darkness. A mixture of fear and irresistible curiosity tugged at him. He knew the elders would never allow it, but he felt he wouldn't be able to rest without at least trying to learn the truth. By the time the first faint glow of dawn touched the sky, Tanga had made up his mind. He would go find Mbala. He would slip away for just a while, just long enough to see the great crocodile with his own eyes. In the grey quiet before sunrise, Tanga eased out from his family's sleeping place in the reeds. The river world was still, most fish were still asleep, and the only sound was a distant owl hooting its last calls of the night. Steeling himself, Tanga began to swim downstream toward the forbidden bend. His heart pounded at what he was about to do. He hadn't gone far when a familiar shape slipped out of the shadows to join him. It was Kendi, looking both groggy and frightened. "Did you really think I'd let you do this alone?" Kendi murmured, falling in beside Tanga. Tanga was surprised, but a warm gratitude filled him. You don't have to come, Kendi. It's going to be dangerous," he said. Kendi gulped but nodded firmly. "Oh no. I'm scared, but I'm your friend. I couldn't let you go by yourself. Someone has to try to keep you out of trouble." Despite the tension, Tanga managed a small smile. With Kendi beside him, he felt braver. Together, the two little fish headed into the unknown, keeping close to the bank and the cover of lily pads as the sky grew lighter in the east. As the sun's early rays began to pierce the mist, Tanga and Kendi ventured beyond the farthest point any of their clan ever dared. The river here was deeper, the banks wilder. Strange fish peered at them from behind rocks before darting away. A fallen tree jutted into the river, its upturned roots thick with moss. As they cautiously swam around it, a large shape moved in the water ahead. Startled, the two friends halted. The shape rose up slowly. It was a big river turtle with a shell scarred by age and journey. She blinked her gentle eyes at the young fish. "Well now," she said in a warm, raspy voice, "what have we here?" Two little fish out for an early morning adventure, so far from home. Tanga and Kendi exchanged a quick, uncertain glance. The turtle did not seem threatening at all. In fact, she smiled kindly. Tanga mustered his courage. "Good morning. My name is Tanga and this is my friend Kendi. We are traveling upstream." He hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "We are actually looking for someone, a crocodile named Mbala." At that, the turtle's eyes widened in surprise. A soft chuckle rumbled from her throat. "Mbala? Now that is bold. Not many creatures go looking for him." She paddled closer and introduced herself. "I'm Niru. I've roamed this river for many years and I've seen Mbala once or twice from afar. Why are you two seeking him out?" Tanga explained their quest, how the legend of Mbala had frightened their community for ages, and how he wanted to find out the truth behind the stories. Niru listened thoughtfully, nodding her wrinkled head. When he finished, she gave a small smile. "You remind me of myself when I was young, curious, and a bit too brave for my own good," she said. "I don't know if Mbala is as fearsome as the tales, but you're right that sometimes stories can grow wild. Still, caution is wise. If you're set on meeting him, I'll come along. I know these waters well, and you may need help before this is over." Relief washed over Tanga. Having a wise guide like Niru made him feel more confident. Kendi looked visibly more at ease too. With the old turtle leading the way, the trio continued toward Mbala's domain, venturing ever deeper into the unknown part of the river. It wasn't long before the jungle around them grew thick and quiet. The river widened into a broad, shadowy pool. Overhanging it was a huge, twisted tree with roots burrowing into the water like giant claws. Niru stopped and whispered, "We are here." Tanga could feel his heart racing. The water was deathly still. On a fallen log, he saw deep claw marks, signs that something powerful had passed that way. Kendi drifted closer to Tanga, his fear palpable. All was silent, as if the whole jungle was holding its breath. Tanga, mustering courage, swam a little forward into the pool. "Mbala," he called softly, the word rippling out into the hush. At first, there was no response. Then a pair of golden eyes slowly broke the surface near the gnarled roots of the great tree. A low, rumbling growl vibrated through the water, sending a shiver through Tanga's fins. From the dark recesses under the tree, an enormous shape emerged. Scales like armor plates glinted as the creature moved forward. A long snout and a wide, jagged mouth lifted above the surface, exactly as the legends described. It was Mbala. The giant crocodile regarded the three small visitors with unblinking eyes. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant. "Who dares enter Mbala's waters?" Tanga felt Kendi trembling beside him, and even Nuru stayed a respectful distance back. Summoning every scrap of bravery, Tanga swam forward a little and bowed his head. "Great Mbala," he said, his voice high but steady enough, "my name is Tanga. My friend Kendi and I come from downstream, and this is Nuru, who has guided us." "We mean you no harm, sir." Mbala's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not attack, so Tanga continued, the words tumbling out, "I've heard stories of you my whole life. Everyone fears you, but I wanted to see you myself, to know if the stories are true. I came to hear the truth from you, sir." A silence followed Tanga's bold declaration. Then, to their surprise, the fearsome crocodile let out a deep, low chuckle. "You've got courage, little fish," Mbala said, baring a few of his long teeth in what might have been an amused grin. "Many have spoken of me, but none of your kind have ever come just to seek the truth." He moved a bit closer, causing Kendi to shrink back and Nuru to watch warily. "So," Mbala mused, "you want to learn who I really am?" His tone was curious, not angry. "That is not a simple thing. Words won't convince you as much as experience. I could tell you I'm exactly the monster from your nightmares, or tell you I'm not. But you wouldn't truly know unless you prove you're worthy of that truth." Tanga's fins quivered, but he kept his gaze on Mbala. "What must I do?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Mbala's eyes gleamed. "I will give you a challenge, little Tanga. Succeed, and I shall answer your questions and let you go unharmed. Fail, and you'll discover firsthand why others fear me." The great crocodile's jaws opened slightly, a reminder of what failure would mean. Tanga and his friends exchanged a tense glance. There was no turning back now. Mbala lifted his massive head and spoke clearly, "Far upstream from here, hidden in the jungle, there is a still lagoon. In its center grows a single flower, a lily with petals as blue as the morning sky. They call it the moon lily because it blooms under the light of the moon. Fetch me that flower. Bring it here to me before dawn, and you will have proven your bravery and wisdom. Do this, and you shall have the truth you seek." Kendi gasped softly. Nuru opened her mouth as if to protest the difficulty of such a task, but Mbala gave a low hiss and she fell silent. "No complaints," the crocodile growled. "The terms are set. The challenge would mean nothing if it were easy. Now go. The sun will set soon, and remember, many dangers lurk in the river at night." Knowing there was no time to waste, Tanga bowed his head. "We will return by dawn with the lily," he promised. Mbala sank back toward the shadow of the tree roots, his glowing eyes the last thing to disappear beneath the dark water. The challenge had begun. Tanga, Kendi, and Nuru exchanged determined looks. Without another word, they turned and swam away swiftly, retracing their path before heading further upstream to seek the hidden lagoon. Night fell as they traveled. Stars blinked to life overhead and a bright moon rose, guiding them with its silver light. The jungle was loud with nighttime noises, now croaking frogs, chirping insects, and the distant cry of nocturnal birds. Remembering Mbala's directions, Nuru led them along a narrow offshoot of the river marked by two vine-covered boulders that stood like silent guards. Squeezing past them, the trio entered a hidden clearing in the forest. There, as Mbala had described, lay a tranquil lagoon. The lagoon's surface was like black glass, reflecting the moon and stars. Around its edges, thick foliage pressed in, and fireflies blinked over the water like tiny lanterns. In the center of the lagoon floated dozens of broad lily pads. Among them, Tanga quickly spotted a single bloom rising proudly above the rest, a beautiful lily with petals that glowed a pale bluish-white in the moonlight. "That must be the moon lily," Tanga whispered. Kendi nodded, eyes wide with awe. It was the most enchanting flower they had ever seen. The three friends moved cautiously into the lagoon. Nuru stayed near the edge, her wise eyes scanning for danger, while Tanga and Kendi glided toward the lily in the center. They pushed aside floating pads until they reached the stem of the moon lily. Tanga took the stem in his mouth and bit down, trying to sever it. It was tough. "Help me," he whispered, and Kendi joined him, the two fish nibbling and tugging with all their might. Slowly, the fibrous stem began to fray. Just as the flower was nearly free, a sudden shadow passed over the moonlit water. Nuru's head jerked up. Down, quick. Hide, she hissed urgently. Tanga and Kendi instantly dove under a nearby lily pad. Through the thin cover of leaves, they saw a large owl swoop silently across the lagoon. Attracted by the movement and ripples, the owl circled, its sharp eyes scanning for prey. Tanga's heart thudded as the huge bird glided low. In the dim light, the owl's eyes looked eerily like twin moons. It swooped down, talons striking the water just feet from where the friends hid. The owl had seen a ripple but missed its mark. For several tense moments, Tanga and Kendi stayed absolutely still beneath the lily pad, barely daring to breathe. Nuru had withdrawn into her shell at the lagoon's edge, looking like a floating log. Frustrated, the owl gave a screech that echoed through the night, and after one more fruitless pass over the lagoon, it flapped its great wings and disappeared back into the darkness of the forest. They waited until the usual night sounds returned. Then, slowly, Tanga and Kendi resurfaced. The moon lily was still there, bobbing gently. With renewed urgency, Tanga gave the stem a final strong bite. At last, it snapped free. Triumph surged through Tanga as he and Kendi carefully gripped the lily's long stem together. "We have it!" Kendi whispered excitedly. Nuru smiled in relief and quickly ushered them back toward the narrow channel. Cradling the precious moon lily, the three turned and hurried back toward Mbala's pool, racing against the coming dawn. The journey downstream felt far quicker than the arduous trip up. The river's current helped carry them, and the night began to fade. Tanga's fins ached and Kendi was breathing hard, but they refused to slow down. The eastern sky was growing lighter with the first hint of dawn when they finally neared the bend of the river ruled by Mbala. Mist clung to the water's surface as morning approached. Tanga clutched the moon lily's stem tightly, determined not to lose it now after all they'd been through. At last, the familiar silhouette of the ancient twisted tree came into view through the lifting mist. They had made it back. Tanga swam forward into Mbala's pool, the lily in tow, with Kendi and Nuru right behind him. The sky was pinking with dawn. Tanga called out, his voice echoing across the quiet water, "Mbala! We have returned." For a moment, nothing stirred. Then the dark water erupted in ripples as the enormous crocodile rose up from the depths. His eyes locked onto the pale blossom the little fish carried. Slowly, Mbala glided nearer, stopping before Tanga. The crocodile's gaze shifted from Tanga's tired face to the moon lily held between Tanga and Kendi. He seemed surprised and impressed. "You succeeded," Mbala rumbled. Gently, Tanga and Kendi released the lily. It drifted toward Mbala, who caught the stem delicately between two of his great claws. Tanga mustered the last of his strength and spoke up, "We did as you asked, great Mbala. We brought the moon lily before dawn." Mbala nodded slowly, causing little waves. "Indeed. I did not truly expect you would return." His tone held open admiration. "You have shown courage, persistence, and also cleverness. I know of the owl that hunts these parts at night. I heard its cry. The fact that you three are here, and unharmed, tells me you used your wits." A hint of a smile seemed to touch the old crocodile's rugged face. "I am a creature of my word. You have fulfilled my challenge, so you have earned the answers you seek, and your lives." Kendi let out a long breath of relief. Nuru placed a flipper gently on Tanga's back in silent pride. Mbala carefully set the moon lily aside among the roots of his tree, then turned back to the weary adventurers. In the growing light of dawn, Tanga could see the crocodile's features clearly, the countless scars along his flanks, a cloudy old eye, and the wear of many years. He looked powerful, yes, but also wise and ancient. "The truth, then," Mbala said quietly. "Listen well, little ones. I am not a spirit or a demon, as some of your legends say. I am a crocodile, the very old one, who has lived in this river longer than any creature can remember. It's true I have hunted fish and others to survive, that is the way of nature. But I do not hunt for sport or cruelty." Tanga listened intently, every word confirming what he had begun to suspect. Mbala continued in a low voice, "I have seen generations of fish come and go. I've watched over this part of the river, and yes, I've fiercely protected it. In doing so, I have at times been harsh. But I am not evil. Your elders weren't entirely wrong to warn you the crocodile is dangerous, and fear kept your kind safe. Yet that fear grew larger than the truth. I became a legend of terror." Mbala's gaze softened. You, Tanga, were brave enough or perhaps foolish enough to look beyond that legend. And because of that courage, you learned that reality is more complicated than the stories. I give you my word, I will not harm you or your friends, nor will I trouble your home waters without cause. If your fish clan respects my part of the river, I shall leave them be. We need not be enemies. Tanga felt a swell of gratitude and understanding. In that moment, looking into Mbala's ancient eyes, he realized the great lesson of this adventure, that fear can exaggerate and distort the truth, and that facing that fear is the only way to unravel it. Mbala settled back slightly, the tension in his huge form easing. Kendi bravely swam forward just a little and said timidly, "Thank you, Mbala." Nuru bowed her head in respect. Mbala nodded. "Go home now, little fish. Your families will be worried. Tell your people what I have told you. Let them know that I guard these waters, but I am not their enemy if they do not seek to harm me." And Tanga, here he fixed the young fish with a keen look, "Remember what you have learned. True courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. You felt fear, yet you still came to face me and complete my challenge. That is courage. And wisdom is seeking the truth even when it is hidden behind scary stories." Tanga's heart brimmed at Mbala's words. "I will remember," he promised. "And I'll make sure the others understand too." With that, the great crocodile gave a final low rumble, not a threatening growl, but almost a gentle goodbye. Then he turned and drifted back under the shadow of the ancient tree, the moon lily's pale bloom resting beside him as a silent reminder of the night's events. In another moment, he was gone, leaving only the ripples that slowly faded into stillness. Tanga, Kendi, and Nuru left Mbala's pool quietly, the first golden beams of the rising sun guiding them downriver toward home. When Tanga and Kendi at last returned to their familiar waters, there was great commotion. Their families and the other fish had been up all night, fearing the worst when they discovered the two friends were missing. But worry quickly turned into amazement as Tanga and Kendi, with Nuru by their side, recounted their incredible journey. The fish listened, spellbound, as the youngsters described how they met the legendary Mbala and undertook his challenge. Gasps and murmurs rose when they heard about the treacherous night quest for the moon lily and how the trio narrowly escaped many dangers. And when they learned that Mbala had kept his word and revealed that he wasn't the mindless monster of their nightmares, the entire community was astonished. From that day on, the way the fish spoke of Mbala changed. The elders still urged caution and respect for the crocodile's territory. He was, after all, a mighty predator, but the blind terror began to fade. They understood now that Mbala was a living being with a role in the river, not an evil spirit lurking just to prey on them. As for Tanga, he became something of a hero among his people. He had faced their greatest fear and returned with wisdom for everyone. He and Kendi would often be asked to tell the tale of their adventure, and they did so gladly, describing how curiosity, courage, and teamwork helped them overcome every challenge. Each time, Tanga reminded his listeners of the lesson Mbala taught him, that courage isn't about not being afraid, but about moving forward despite fear to discover the truth. Sometimes, at twilight, Tanga would swim near the bend of the river. If he looked carefully, he could spot two faint amber eyes in the distance under the old twisted tree, watching peacefully. Tanga would smile and flick his tail in greeting, knowing that the great crocodile was watching over the river like a silent guardian. Fear had been replaced by understanding and respect. And so, in the lush, mysterious rivers of the Congo, the legend of the little fish and the crocodile was born. It was a tale whispered by the flowing water and carried in the hush of the evening breeze, the tale of how a brave, curious fish named Tanga, with the help of his loyal friends, faced his greatest fear and uncovered the truth behind a legend. A tale that proved that sometimes, if you have the courage to seek the truth, even the scariest stories can have a hopeful ending.